Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of the New Horizon research ship onto the surface of planet Kepler 442c. The twin suns blazed overhead, casting strange shadows through the amber-colored trees that stretched as far as his eyes could see. This was his fourth day on the alien world, and he still felt amazed by how much it looked like the African savanna back on Earth. Except everything here seemed bigger and more colorful. His crew stayed busy back at the ship, running tests on rock samples and checking their equipment. Jake preferred these solo walks into the wilderness. The company back on Earth had sent them here to look for valuable minerals, but Jake found himself more interested in the strange animals he kept seeing in the distance. They looked like lions and zebras and antelope, but with extra legs and glowing spots on their fur that pulsed like tiny stars. The forest around him buzzed with alien insects that sounded almost like earth crickets. Purple flowers grew on vines that twisted around the crystal-clear tree trunks. Everything felt peaceful and magical, like stepping into a fairy tale world. Jake adjusted his backpack and checked his water supply. He had enough for several hours of hiking, and his communication device would keep him connected to the ship. As he walked deeper into the woods, Jake noticed how quiet everything had become. The buzzing insects had stopped their noise, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Something felt wrong, but he could not figure out what it was. Then he heard it, a soft crying sound that reminded him of a kitten in distress. Jake followed the sound, pushing through thick bush and stepping over fallen logs. The crying got louder as he moved forward, and his heart started beating faster. Whatever was making that noise sounded hurt and scared. He had always been the kind of person who stopped to help injured animals back on Earth, and this felt no different. The source of the crying led him to a small clearing where several large trees had fallen in a messy pile. Broken branches and chunks of crystal bark covered the ground like pieces of a shattered puzzle. But what caught Jake's attention was the small golden creature trapped beneath one of the smaller logs. It looked like a lion cub, but with 6 legs instead of 4 and the most beautiful blue eyes Jake had ever seen. The little animal's fur glowed with soft golden light, and when it saw Jake approaching, its eyes grew wide with fear. One of its back legs was pinned under the log, and Jake could see that it was hurt. The cub tried to pull itself free, but the log was too heavy. Its cries became more desperate when it saw Jake, as if it was begging for help but also afraid of this strange creature that walked on only 2 legs. Jake knelt down slowly, speaking in a soft voice even though he knew the cub could not understand. His words, "Easy there, little guy," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let me help you get out of there." The cub stopped struggling and watched Jake with those incredible blue eyes. Something in Jake's gentle tone seemed to calm the frightened animal. Looking at the situation, Jake realized he would need to lift the log carefully to free the cub without hurting it more. He positioned himself at one end of the fallen tree and began to lift. The log was heavier than it looked, and Jake had to use all his strength to raise it high enough. His muscles strained and his face turned red from the effort, but slowly the log began to move upward. The moment the weight lifted off its leg, the cub scrambled backward and pressed itself against a large rock. It was shaking with fear and pain, but its eyes never left Jake's face. Jake could see that the back leg was injured, not broken, but definitely hurt. The little animal needed medical attention, even if Jake was not sure what kind of help he could provide to an alien creature. Jake opened his backpack and pulled out his first aid kit. He had bandages, antiseptic, and a small splint that might work for the cub's injured leg. Moving very slowly so he would not frighten the animal more, Jake crept forward with the medical supplies in his hands. The cub watched every movement but did not try to run away. "I know you don't understand me," Jake said quietly, "but I want to help fix your leg. It's going to be okay." He offered his hand for the cub to sniff, just like he would do with a scared dog back on Earth. After a moment of hesitation, the little alien creature stretched its neck forward and touched Jake's fingers with its small nose. The moment their skin made contact, Jake felt something amazing happen. A warm, tingling sensation ran up his arm, and suddenly he felt calmer and happier than he had in years. The cub's glowing spots pulsed brighter, and its frightened whimpering changed to a soft purring sound that seemed to vibrate through Jake's entire body. It was like the cub was saying thank you in a language that went deeper than words, working as gently as possible. Jake cleaned the cub's injured leg and wrapped it with bandages. The little animal held perfectly still, as if it understood that Jake was trying to help. When Jake finished, he offered the cub some water from his canteen. The alien creature lapped it up eagerly, and its purring grew even louder. Jake sat back on his heels and looked around the clearing again. Now that he was not focused on rescuing the cub, he noticed something strange about the fallen trees. The breaks in the wood looked too clean and straight to be from wind or age. Burn marks scarred the tree trunks in patterns that reminded Jake of weapon blasts he had seen in war movies. This was not natural damage. Someone or something had deliberately destroyed this part of the forest. A chill ran down Jake's spine as he realized what this might mean. If something had attacked this area on purpose, then whoever did it might still be around. The cub's family was probably looking for it, and they might not be happy to find a strange alien creature holding their baby. Jake looked down at the injured cub, who had curled up next to his leg and was still purring softly. The little animal trusted him completely now, but Jake knew he had to get it back to safety before its family found them. He had no idea how big or dangerous adult versions of these creatures might be, and he definitely did not want to find out while he was alone in the middle of an alien forest. Carefully picking up the cub, Jake was surprised by how light it felt, despite having 6 legs. The little creature nestled against his chest and continued its soothing purr. Jake started walking back toward where he thought he had entered the clearing, hoping to find signs of the cub's family or at least a safe place to leave it where they would find it. But as he reached the edge of the clearing, Jake heard something that made his blood freeze in his veins. Deep, rumbling growls echoed through the forest from multiple directions. Whatever was making those sounds was big, and there was more than one of them. Jake clutched the cub closer to his chest and realized that his rescue mission was about to become much more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Jake's heart pounded as the deep growls grew louder around him. He held the injured cub close to his chest, feeling its small body trembling against him. The little creature had stopped purring and was now making soft whimpering sounds that seemed to be calling out to whatever was approaching through the trees. The first adult creature stepped into the clearing, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. It was massive, easily 8 feet tall at the shoulder with golden fur that rippled with muscle. 6 powerful legs carried it forward with deadly grace, and its crystalline blue eyes locked onto Jake with an intensity that made him feel like prey. The bioluminescent spots along its flanks pulsed bright red, creating patterns that Jake somehow knew meant danger. But this was not the worst part. More growls echoed from different directions as other adults emerged from the forest. Jake counted them as they appeared: 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 massive predators, each one bigger than any lion he had ever seen in documentaries. They moved in perfect coordination, surrounding him in a semicircle that left no escape. Root, the largest of the group, stepped forward, and Jake knew immediately that this was their leader. Silver streaks ran through his golden mane, and old scars crossed his powerful shoulders and face. His eyes held an intelligence that Jake found both fascinating and terrifying. This was not just an animal, this was a thinking being who was deciding whether Jake was a threat to be eliminated. Jake forced himself to remain still, even though every instinct screamed at him to run. Running would only trigger their hunting instincts, and he knew he could never outrun creatures with 6 legs and muscles like steel cables. Instead, he tried to make himself appear as non-threatening as possible while still protecting the cub. In his arms, the injured cub suddenly perked up and began making excited mewing sounds. It struggled weakly in Jake's arms, trying to reach toward the adult creatures. Jake realized that these must be its family members, and they had come looking for their missing young one. The problem was that from their perspective, Jake was probably the one who had hurt their baby. The pack leader took another step closer, his massive head lowering as he sniffed the air. Jake could smell the creature's breath, warm and earthy like a summer forest. The other adults maintained their positions, but their red warning lights pulsed faster, showing their growing agitation. Jake understood that he was in immediate danger, but he also knew that making any sudden moves would probably get him killed. "I'm trying to help," Jake said softly, knowing they could not understand his words but hoping his tone would convey his peaceful intentions. "Your baby was hurt. I just wanted to help." He slowly began to lower himself toward the ground, moving like he was dealing with a dangerous dog that might bite. The pack leader's eyes followed Jake's every movement. When Jake was kneeling on the forest floor, he gently placed the injured cub on the ground between himself and the adults. The little creature immediately began limping toward its family, dragging its bandaged leg but calling out happily to them. One of the smaller adults, probably the cub's mother, rushed forward and began nuzzling her baby. She sniffed the bandages on its leg and looked up at Jake with what he hoped was surprise rather than anger. The cub mewed and rubbed against its mother, then turned back toward Jake and made soft purring sounds. Jake stayed perfectly still as the pack leader approached him. The massive creature was so close now that Jake could see his reflection in those intelligent blue eyes. He could feel the warmth radiating from the alien's body and hear the steady rhythm of his breathing. This was the moment when his fate would be decided. The pack leader lowered his enormous head until his nose was just inches from Jake's face. Jake closed his eyes and tried to control his breathing as the creature sniffed him thoroughly. He could feel warm breath on his skin and knew that those powerful jaws could crush his skull without effort. Time seemed to stretch forever as the alien predator learned his scent and made his judgment. When Jake finally opened his eyes, he found the pack leader staring directly at him with an expression he could not read. The red warning lights on the creature's flanks had faded to a softer orange color, but Jake was not sure if that was good or bad. The other adults remained in their positions, waiting for their leader's decision. The injured cub limped back toward Jake, ignoring its mother's attempts to keep it close. It pressed against Jake's leg and began purring again, its golden spots glowing brighter than before. Jake realized that the little creature was trying to tell its family that Jake was a friend, not an enemy. The pack leader's eyes moved from Jake to the cub and back again. Jake could almost see the thoughts forming in that intelligent mind as the creature processed what had happened. The bandages on the cub's leg were clearly not natural, and the little one's behavior toward Jake was obviously friendly and trusting. Suddenly, the pack leader did something completely unexpected. He opened his mouth and began making a series of low, musical sounds that were completely different from the threatening growls Jake had heard before. The other adults joined in, creating a harmony that seemed to resonate through the ground itself. Jake felt the vibrations in his chest and realized he was hearing some kind of alien song. The bioluminescent spots on all the creatures began changing color, shifting from red and orange to deep blues and purples. The pack leader's eyes never left Jake's face as the song continued, and Jake began to understand that this was not a threat. This was something else entirely, something that felt almost like a ceremony. When the song ended, the pack leader stepped even closer to Jake. The massive creature slowly lowered his head until his forehead touched Jake's forehead. Jake felt a strange, tingling sensation, similar to what he had experienced when he first touched the cub, but much stronger. For a moment, he felt like he could almost understand what the creature was thinking: gratitude, respect, and something. That felt like acceptance. The other adults began moving, but instead of attacking, they were repositioning themselves around Jake. He realized with amazement that they were not surrounding him as enemies anymore. They were surrounding him as protectors, forming a circle that would keep him safe from any outside threats. The pack leader stepped back and made a gesture with his massive head toward the deeper forest. Jake looked in that direction and saw a path he had not noticed before. The creature repeated the gesture, and Jake suddenly understood that he was being invited to come with them. They wanted him to follow them somewhere, and from the way they were behaving, it was clear that he was welcome. Jake stood up slowly, still amazed by what was happening. The injured cub limped over to him and rubbed against his leg affectionately. Its mother watched this interaction with what Jake could only describe as approval. The pack leader made another musical sound, softer this time, and began walking toward the hidden path. As the group began moving deeper into the alien forest, Jake realized that his life had just changed forever. He was no longer just a human. Exploring an alien world, he was now part of something much bigger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined possible. Jake walked through the alien forest surrounded by his new companions, still amazed by what had happened. The pack moved with quiet grace around him, their 6 legs carrying them smoothly over rocks and fallen logs that would have made Jake stumble. The injured cub stayed close to his side, limping but determined to keep up with the group. The path they followed was unlike anything Jake had seen before. It wound between massive crystal trees whose trunks sparkled like diamonds in the filtered sunlight. Strange flowers bloomed along the way, their petals glowing softly in colors that had no names in human language. The air smelled sweet and clean, filled with scents that reminded Jake of honey and fresh rain. As they walked deeper into the forest, Jake noticed that the pack leader kept looking back at him with those intelligent blue eyes. The creature seemed to be studying him, learning about this strange 2-legged being who had helped their young. Jake tried to walk with confidence, but he felt clumsy and slow compared to his graceful companions. After what felt like hours of walking, the group reached a place where the trees opened into a wide valley. Jake gasped when he saw what lay before them. Carved into the face of a towering cliff were dozens of caves, their openings decorated with beautiful crystal formations that caught and reflected the sunlight. Gardens of glowing plants grew in terraced levels down the cliff face, creating a living work of art that took Jake's breath away. This was clearly the home of the pack, but it was so much more than Jake had expected. This was not just a place where animals lived. This was a settlement created by intelligent beings who understood beauty and planning. Walkways had been carefully carved into the rock, connecting the different caves and garden levels. Water flowed down the cliff in controlled streams that fed the plants and created small pools for drinking. Other members of the species emerged from the caves as Jake and his escorts approached. There were adults of different sizes, some with the silver-streaked manes that seemed to indicate age and wisdom, others younger and more energetic. But what amazed Jake most were the young ones, cubs of various ages, who came running to greet the returning group with excited calls and glowing spots that pulsed rapidly with joy. When the other creatures saw Jake, they stopped and stared. Some backed away nervously, their bioluminescent markings shifting to cautious yellow colors. Others moved closer, their curiosity overcoming their fear. Jake realized he was probably the first human any of them had ever seen, and he tried to appear as friendly and non-threatening as possible. The pack leader made a series of musical sounds, and Jake understood that he was explaining to the others what had happened. The injured cub limped forward and added its own voice to the explanation, rubbing against Jake's leg to show the assembled crowd that this strange creature was a friend. Gradually, the yellow warning colors faded from the other creature's markings, replaced by softer blues and greens. An elderly female with a graying mane approached Jake slowly. Her eyes were kind but ancient, filled with a wisdom that spoke of many years of life and experience. She sniffed Jake carefully, then made a gentle sound that somehow conveyed welcome and gratitude. Jake felt honored to receive her approval. The pack leader gestured toward one of the larger caves, and Jake understood he was being invited inside. As they climbed the carved walkway, Jake marveled at the skill required to create such a structure. The steps were perfectly sized for the 6-legged creatures, but Jake found he could navigate them without too much difficulty. Inside the cave, Jake discovered something that amazed him even more. The walls were covered with what could only be described as artwork, swirling patterns that seemed to tell stories, carved into the stone with incredible detail. Crystals had been embedded in the rock to provide gentle lighting, creating an atmosphere that was both beautiful and peaceful. The pack leader led Jake to a comfortable area where soft moss had been arranged like cushions. Other adults gathered around, their eyes fixed on Jake with intense curiosity. The injured cub settled beside him, still purring softly and glowing with contentment. Jake felt like he was part of something sacred, a moment of first contact between two intelligent species. Then the pack leader did something that changed everything. He approached Jake and gently touched his massive forehead to Jake's head, just as he had done in the forest. But this time, instead of just a brief connection, Jake felt his mind opening to receive something incredible. Images flooded into Jake's consciousness, not his own memories, but those of the creature sharing them with him. He saw the history of this species, their civilization that had once covered the entire continent. He witnessed their peaceful way of life, their harmony with the natural world, and their deep family bonds that extended beyond blood relations to include their entire community. But then the images turned dark and frightening. Jake saw machines. Sleek, deadly constructs that moved with mechanical precision through the forests. These were not natural creatures but artificial hunters designed for one purpose: to kill. Jake watched in horror as these machines systematically destroyed the settlements of the peaceful creatures, forcing them to flee to hidden places like this valley. The pack leader shared memories of friends and family members who had been killed by these machines. Jake felt the creature's grief and anger, but also his determination to protect the survivors. He understood now why the pack had been so cautious when they first found him. They had learned to fear anything that was not part of their own kind. As the mental connection continued, Jake began to understand more about the machines. They were ancient, left behind by some long-vanished species that had tried to colonize this world. The original creators were gone, but their weapons continued to function, following programming that commanded them to eliminate all native life forms. The pack leader showed Jake the trap that had injured the cub, a mechanical snare hidden in the debris field. These machines were becoming more sophisticated, learning from each encounter and adapting their tactics. The creatures Jake had befriended were not just hiding from death, they were slowly losing a war against an enemy that never tired, never gave up, and never stopped hunting. When the mental connection ended, Jake sat back with tears in his eyes. He looked around at the beautiful cave, at the gentle creatures who had welcomed him, and at the injured cub who had started this incredible journey. These beings deserved to live in peace, to raise their young without fear, and to continue their ancient civilization. Jake realized that he had been given more than just acceptance. Into their community, he had been given a responsibility. He was the first human to learn about their struggle, and he might be their only hope for survival. The machines that hunted them were ancient and powerful, but they had never faced human technology and human determination. As he looked into the intelligent eyes of the pack leader, Jake made a silent promise. He would find a way to help these creatures reclaim their world. He would use every resource at his disposal to turn the tide in this ancient war. The machines might be designed to kill, but they had never encountered the stubbornness and ingenuity of a human being who refused to give up. The pack leader seemed to sense Jake's determination, and his bioluminescent markings pulsed with colors that Jake was beginning to recognize as hope. Around them, the other creatures watched with growing excitement, as if they too could feel that something important was about to change in their long struggle for survival. Jake spent 3 days living with the alien pride, learning their ways and understanding the full scope of their desperate situation. The pack leader, who Jake began thinking of as elder, showed him hidden passages throughout their cliff home, where the creatures stored their most precious belongings, ancient artifacts, family treasures, and most importantly, detailed cave paintings that recorded the locations of every hunter-machine encounter over the past century. The paintings told a story that broke Jake's heart. Once, these beings had lived freely across the entire continent, their settlements connected by trade routes and family bonds. Now they were reduced to this single hiding place, the last survivors of what had once been a thriving civilization. Elder showed Jake markings that indicated other settlements had once existed, but they were all crossed out with dark paint, destroyed by the relentless machines. Jake studied the hunter machine drawings with growing determination. The creatures had observed their enemies carefully, noting weak points and behavioral patterns. The machines were fast and deadly, but they followed predictable routines. They patrolled specific areas on regular schedules, used the same types of sensors, and always hunted alone rather than in groups. On the fourth morning, Jake made his decision. He activated his communication device and called his crew back at the New Horizons ship. The voice of his communications officer, Lisa Parker, crackled through the speaker with obvious relief. "Jake, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for days." Chief Engineer Ryan Cooper is going crazy with worry, and Navigator Amy Foster has been plotting search patterns nonstop. Jake looked around at the alien creatures who had gathered to listen to this strange device that let him talk to distant humans. "Lisa, I need you to patch me through to everyone. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but I need you to trust me." When his entire crew was listening, Jake explained everything that had happened. He told them about rescuing the cub, meeting the pack, discovering their civilization, and learning about the hunter machines that threatened to wipe out the last members of an intelligent species. He could hear the shock and disbelief in their voices as he described the mental connection with Elder and the history he had witnessed. "Jake, are you feeling okay?" Ryan's voice carried genuine concern. "Maybe you hit your head or got sick from something you ate?" Telepathic alien lions sound pretty far-fetched, even for this crazy planet. "I know how it sounds," Jake replied, "but I'm sending you video footage right now." He activated his recorder and filmed Elder demonstrating the bioluminescent communication patterns, the cave artwork, and most convincingly, the injured cub walking around with its human-made bandages, the silence on the communication channel. Stretched for a long minute as his crew watched the evidence. Finally, Amy's voice came through, filled with wonder. "Jake, this is incredible. We're looking at proof of intelligent alien life, and they're in danger." "That's right," Jake said. "And we're the only ones who can help them. I need you to redirect our mission from mineral surveys to what I'm calling a humanitarian rescue operation." Lisa's voice carried doubt. "Jake, we're a research vessel with mining equipment. We're not equipped for combat against alien war machines. Shouldn't we contact Earth Command and let them send a military ship?" Jake had already considered this option during his days with the Pride. "By the time we send a message to Earth and wait for a response, these machines will have found this settlement. The creatures showed me patrol patterns. The hunters are getting closer every day. We might have weeks before they discover this place, but we definitely don't have the months it would take for Earth to send help." Elder approached Jake and touched his forehead gently, sharing images of the approaching danger. Jake felt the creature's urgency and fear, not for himself, but for his family and the youngsters who played in the cave gardens. The mental connection also carried something else, hope, based on Elder's growing understanding of human capabilities. "Besides," Jake continued, "we do have advantages these machines won't expect. Our mining drones can be modified for combat. Our sensors are more advanced than anything these ancient hunters were designed to counter. And most importantly, we can work with the local survivors who know every inch of this terrain." Ryan's engineering mind was already working on the problem. "Jake, if you can get me detailed information about these hunter machines, size, speed, weapons, armor thickness, I might be able to modify our equipment. The mining drones have powerful cutting lasers, and we could probably rig some kind of weapon system." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say," Jake replied with growing excitement. "Elder has been observing these things for years. He can show us their weak points and behavioral patterns." Amy added her support to the plan. "Our ship's mobility gives us a huge advantage. We can move fast, strike from unexpected angles, and retreat before the machines can respond effectively. It's like guerrilla warfare, but with better technology." Over the next several hours, Jake worked with Elder to translate the cave paintings into information his human crew could understand. The alien creatures had been documenting every detail about their mechanical enemies, creating a database of knowledge that would have impressed any military intelligence officer. The hunter machines were roughly the size of small tanks, with 6 legs like the creatures they hunted but made of metal and ceramic armor. They used energy weapons similar to lasers, and their sensors could track heat signatures and movement. But they had limitations too. They avoided water, had trouble with steep terrain, and their sensors could be confused by certain types of crystal formations that were common in this area. Elder showed Jake something even more important through their mental connection. The machines had a central communication hub, a larger construct hidden in the mountains that coordinated all the smaller hunters. If that hub could be destroyed, the individual machines would become much less effective, hunting randomly instead. Of following coordinated search patterns. Jake shared this intelligence with his crew, and Ryan immediately began planning modifications to their equipment. If we can take out their command center, we turn this from an organized extermination campaign into a cleanup operation. The individual hunters will be dangerous but manageable. How long do you need to prepare? Jake asked. Give me 2 days. To modify the drones and upgrade our defensive systems, Ryan replied. Amy can use that time to map the terrain around the command hub, and Lisa can work on communication protocols so we can coordinate with our new alien allies during battle. Jake looked at Elder, who had been listening to the conversation with intense interest even though he could not understand the words. The creature's bioluminescent markings were pulsing with colors that Jake had learned meant determination and readiness for action. Through their mental link, Jake felt Elder's eagerness to finally fight back against the machines that had terrorized his people for so long. 2 days it is, Jake said into his communicator. But we're not just fighting for the survival of an alien species. We're fighting for the right of intelligent life to exist in this universe without fear. We're about to show these ancient machines what happens when they mess with creatures under human protection. As Jake ended the communication and began planning strategy with Elder, he felt a profound sense of purpose. He had come to this planet looking for valuable rocks, but he had found something infinitely more precious: the chance to save an entire civilization and prove that humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, but its willingness to fight for others who could not fight for themselves. 2 days later, Jake stood on the deck of the New Horizon as it lifted off from its landing site and headed toward the mountains where the Hunter Machine Command Center waited. His crew had worked without sleep to transform their peaceful research vessel into a weapon of war. Ryan had modified their mining drones with explosive charges and targeting systems, while Amy had mapped every possible approach route to their target. Elder rode beside Jake in the ship's cargo hold, along with 6 of his strongest warriors. The alien creatures had never been inside a human vehicle before, but they adapted quickly to the experience. Their bioluminescent markings pulsed with steady blue light that Jake had learned meant focused determination. They were ready to reclaim their world. Lisa's voice came over the ship's communication system as they approached the target area. Jake, I'm picking up energy signatures from the command hub. It's bigger than we expected, about the size of a football field and heavily armored. I'm also detecting 3 hunter machines patrolling the perimeter. Jake looked at Elder, who touched his forehead and shared tactical information through their mental link. The alien warrior showed him weak points in the command center's design, areas where the armor was thinner to allow for ventilation and sensor arrays. He also revealed the patrol patterns of the Guardian machines, knowledge gained through careful observation over many years. Amy, bring us in from the north side, Jake instructed. Elder says there's a blind spot in their sensor coverage behind. Those crystal formations? We can drop our assault team there and approach on foot. The plan was simple but dangerous. Jake and Elder's warriors would infiltrate the command center and plant explosives while the New Horizon provided air support and distraction. Ryan's modified drones would engage the patrol machines, drawing their attention away from the infiltration team. As the ship descended toward the drop zone, Jake checked his equipment one final time. He carried explosive charges, a plasma cutter for getting through armor, and a communication device to coordinate with his team. The alien warriors needed no equipment beyond their natural speed, strength, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Remember, Jake said to his crew over the intercom, these machines have been active for centuries. They're smart, and they learn from every encounter. Don't underestimate them, and don't take unnecessary risks. Our goal is to destroy the command center, not to win a fair fight. The New Horizon touched down briefly in a hidden valley, and Jake led Elder's warriors out into the alien wilderness. The command center loomed ahead of them, a massive structure of black metal and glowing conduits that looked like a cancer growing. On the natural landscape, 3 hunter machines moved around its perimeter with mechanical precision. Their sensors sweeping constantly for threats, Elder made a series of soft sounds to his warriors, and they spread out in perfect formation. Jake was amazed by their coordination. No human military unit could have moved with such silent efficiency. The creatures used hand signals and color changes in their markings to communicate, creating a seamless flow of information between team members. The attack began when Ryan's drone struck the patrol machines from above. Laser fire and explosions lit up the mountainside as the ancient hunters found themselves under assault from enemies they had never encountered before. The machines were fast and deadly, but they had been designed to fight 6-legged predators on the ground, not flying robots with advanced targeting systems, while the battle raged around the perimeter. Jake and the alien warriors slipped through the sensor blind spot and approached the command center itself. Up close, the structure was even more impressive and frightening. It hummed with power, and Jake could see dozens of communication arrays, sending signals to hunter machines across the continent. Elder led them to a maintenance hatch that his people had discovered during previous reconnaissance missions. Jake used his plasma cutter to slice through the locking mechanism, and they climbed inside the massive structure. The interior was a maze of corridors and machinery. Lit by pulsing lights that created an otherworldly atmosphere, they moved quickly through the command center, planting explosive charges at key structural points. Jake marveled at Elder's knowledge of the building's layout. The alien creature navigated the complex as if he had been studying it his entire life. The warriors moved like ghosts, their soft paws making no sound on the metal floors. As they placed the final charges, alarms began blaring throughout the structure. Their presence had been detected, and Jake could hear the mechanical sounds of defense systems activating. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors as guard machines moved to intercept them. "Time to go," Jake said, activating his communicator. "Lisa, we need extraction now. The whole place is waking up." The escape was a running battle through corridors filled with laser fire and mechanical roars. The guard machines were smaller than the hunters, but faster and more maneuverable in tight spaces. Elder's warriors used their natural agility to stay ahead of their pursuers, while Jake provided covering fire with his plasma cutter. They burst out of the command center. Just as the New Horizons swooped down to pick them up, Ryan's drones had disabled 2 of the patrol machines, but the third was closing in fast. Jake and the warriors leaped aboard the ship as Amy pulled them up and away from the doomed structure. "Charges are set," Jake reported as they gained altitude. 10 seconds to detonation. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit. The ancient command center disappeared in a ball of fire and debris that lit up the entire mountain range. Secondary explosions rocked the area as stored energy and ammunition cooked off in the intense heat. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but a crater in the mountainside. Elder touched Jake's forehead and shared the sensation of relief and joy flowing through the mental network that connected all his people. Across the continent, hunter machines suddenly stopped their coordinated patrols and began wandering aimlessly. Their central guidance system destroyed. Over the following weeks, Jake and his crew helped the alien creatures hunt down the remaining machines. Without their command center, the hunters were dangerous but predictable, following simple programming that made them easy to ambush and destroy. One by one, the ancient threats were eliminated. On their final day on the planet, Jake stood in the cliff settlement watching alien cubs play in the gardens without fear. Elder approached him carrying a small crystal pendant that glowed with the same warm light as the creature's markings. Through their mental link, Jake understood that this was more than a gift. It was a symbol of the bond between their species. Elder shared one final vision with Jake, a future where humans and his people worked together to rebuild the damaged continent. where children of both species could grow up in safety and friendship. It was a dream worth fighting for, and Jake knew that this would not be the last time humans and these magnificent creatures would stand together against those who threatened the innocent Dot as the New Horizon lifted off for its journey back to Earth. Jake held the glowing pendant and smiled. He had come to this world looking for valuable minerals, but he was leaving with something infinitely more precious, the knowledge that in a universe full of wonders and dangers, compassion and courage could bridge any gap between intelligent beings who chose to see each other as friends rather than enemies.